month after getting back, I was in a classroom in Columbia University in Manhattan. Didn't know anybody. No brothers, no tribe, no continuity. In the 2 months I went to college after high school, it was the first time I sat in a classroom. That was necessary for my own growth because the SEAL teams are pretty homogenous. You get guys with different belief systems and stuff, but most of them are they look like me, they talk like me, they want to fight like me. And then going to Columbia, we would have people from dozens of countries, totally different backgrounds, people who grew up in ways I couldn't even imagine, done Ivy League undergrads. But at the same time, I was trying to figure out, what did I just lose? How do I get that back? How do I get back a path? How do I build another tribe?
I actually would love to start this conversation with a question for you, which is a very common question that I hear on my new favorite podcast, where the host often asks his guests, "Where'd you grow up?" Which is obviously what you ask people is from your podcast, from the Nobel podcast. But I would love to know a little bit about your origin story, where you grew up, where you're from.
Yeah, I grew up in Dallas, Pennsylvania, small town, middle of nowhere, Northeast PA, probably 40 minutes outside of Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. Wilkes-Barre had its heyday probably 100 years ago when coal was a thing. So not much there. Not a bad way to grow up. Outside all the time, rock slides. Just working probably since I was 14 years old. Yeah, it was the kind of place not a bad place to grow up, but then not the kind of place you go back to. Unfortunately, maybe someday it'll have its day again, but it was good to get out of there.
And you said you started working at 14. Any fun jobs as you were developing?
Yeah, shovel horse shit. And then I worked at a mini mart. So that was it from about 14 to 18.
Nice polarity.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is also kind of true of your career to go from SEAL teams, then you went right to Columbia after that. I see. When did you start thinking that you wanted to not only join the military, but then was that at the same time, or what made you kind of go toward your career that you had in the military?
Yeah, when I was 14, that was when I latched on the idea of becoming a SEAL. That was like the dream. So I was shoveling horse shit, baling hay. I just felt like a general sense of what the fuck are you doing with your life? Like at an early age, it struck me, you got one shot at this thing, make the most of it. I'm like, all right, what's the thing that maximizes the body, maximizes the mind? And back, I did like a primitive Google search back then. I came up with the Navy SEALs, knew nothing about it, knew nobody in the military. And I realized that was it. That's going to be my goal. Every day was training and reading every single day. Like, I'm going to build myself to attain this goal. So I thought about that from the age of 14. I tried to give college a shot because my mom wanted me to. I gave it a good 2 or 3 months before I quit, enlisted, went straight to buds. So I enlisted in the Navy in November 2007 and went straight to SEAL training, straight through SEAL training, straight to the SEAL teams. The rest is history.
Amazing. And it's funny, like real quick, you quit school. So like a lot of people think Navy SEALs and special operations individuals, they just have no quit in them. And I love the idea, like quitting is actually a good thing where it doesn't align with what your real goals are. Like just gritting down and persevering in something that doesn't serve you. Pivot real quick when you get a flavor of something and it's not in line with you. How old are you now?
I'm 37.
I was trying to do math in my head real quick, but yeah, we're almost the same age. I got a year and maybe some change on you because I turned 39 in a month. But that's awesome. 14 years old, and then you had the discipline and foresight to, I want to start reading and training. Did you have any individuals in your life that like mentored you or you looked up to be like, this is what I'm going to do at this young age? When, I mean, my stories at 14 are not going to be anywhere near as impressive as that. It's going to be me just doing a bunch of dumb shit and getting in trouble. You started dialing in at 14. Why?
No, I didn't have any significant mentors but my mom. My parents split when I was super young. So probably from 11 on, it was my mom and my sisters. And she was like like, like the anchor of my life. Like she was the epitome of what it was to be good, to be pure, to get after it because she was working multiple jobs for us. And like I felt her pain. I'm like, someday I'd like to be able to reciprocate, to do right by that. So whatever good is in me came from her. And that was like the mentorship I had, that never quit attitude came from her. And that was it. That was the only mentor I had. And part of the reasons in going to the teams was to find kind of what I was looking for, like an actual mentor, an actual tribe. Um, that was the main goal. I wanted that brotherhood, and that was worth fighting for. And like the second I got into the military, I'm like, all right, That was what I was missing. This is brutal. This is hard. It's unforgiving. Standards are extremely high, but there's a path and there's a way and there's some communication on what it means to reach for that goal, how to get there, a way to live. And you just glide right into that tribe. And once you're on that freight train, it's uh, it's a thrill. It's a thrill. It was one of the best times of my life.
Beautiful. Did you join then? You said you went to college. So right after high school, you went to college for a few months, then pivoted and went right to Navy. So were you teenager still when you joined the Navy?
Yeah, teenager. I was 19. Navy had an awesome program to help you get your degree if you're willing to go without sleep for a while. So I immediately started doing online classes while I was in. Got my undergrad degree from University of Maryland. At the same time, while doing deployments and workup, I was training for the GMAT so I could go to get my master's. And then right before my second deployment to Afghanistan, that was when I was accepted to Columbia. So I had two options. Do I go to get my master's at Columbia, or do I go to a different unit within the Navy? And you know, my deployments probably checked every box that could be checked. And the war was winding down. Given how much I had seen, uh, if there wasn't a war, I didn't necessarily want to keep training. If a war was going on, I would have been all in the whole time. But once that started slowing down, I'm like, oh, what's the next chapter going to be? And that was when I decided to step out.
Beautiful. I definitely want to start talking about transition out soon, but I'm curious, what books were you reading when you started thinking, I want to go teams, or even after you joined teams, any ones that stood out? Because I guess I could weave in the same question. When did you find philosophy, and when did that start impacting your life?
Oh, I was a knuckle dragger back then. I had no idea what I was doing. So I read anything I can get my hands on. A lot of it was just like random fiction lying around. I read a lot of Thoreau randomly, like Walden. Just totally like weird eclectic mix. I didn't discover philosophy until I got out. That was dealing with the transition was when I discovered philosophy. That was when I dug into Socrates. I didn't realize, I think most people didn't, like how much of a combat veteran he was. He had multiple campaigns beneath his belt, acts of heroism, saving Alcibiades and his armor. My hunch is that was a significant factor in him creating his philosophy. Like one of his main core themes is, I know that I know nothing. It's about ignorance. It's about admitting you have ignorance. And he saw a couple campaigns where the carnage was like extreme. He did a blockade of a city at one point where they were doing cannibalism to try to make it through the siege. He saw that. And I have to assume he realized that, like, what is one of the main causes of war? It's ignorance. And he probably took that to the extreme and said, all right, let's back up. Let's admit each of us don't know everything and start from first principles. And that's probably why his method was destructive. The Socratic method is destructive, and not that, like, hey, if I ask you what's the definition of justice and you give me your definition, I lead you in a roundabout way to get you to agree to a complete diametrically opposite definition of justice. One, you admit you don't know it, but two, you're not closer to the truth. Like, you didn't actually get a new definition. Do that enough and people hate you and eventually they kill you. So it's like a super destructive method. He was executed by the state for doing that method. But I think his philosophy was just the admittance that, hey, man, we don't know everything. If we want to move forward, at least admit that, and then we could build something beautiful. And if it weren't for that, you probably wouldn't have had Plato. If you didn't have Plato, you wouldn't have Aristotle. If you didn't have all these guys, you wouldn't have the Stoics. They were like the birth of true philosophy, not in an academic sense, but in the sense of how do you actually live to a code. This, like to go off on a tangent, this is why I write so much about pre-state peoples. So back then, you had your life was built around a tribe, around a cosmic orientation, and from the day of your birth, there was an oral tradition. There was a way to live. And when the state came to be, or even the city-state back then, that natural method was basically abolished. And then you got some thoughtful people saying, okay, how do we live good lives without the must of nature? How do we create our own code? And then you get guys like Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and then ultimately the Stoics. And Stoicism is interesting because you had the initial Stoics, basically, it was almost like a form of withdrawal, like the apathy. It was almost too apathetic. And then when in Roman times came, when you went from a city state to a no shit state, the individual meant even less. So the individual primary in the pre-state world, pretty crucial in the city-state world, and then almost irrelevant in the state world, like in Rome when the empire started to expand. So they said, how do we take Stoicism and make it not withdrawal, but duty bound? How do we make a functional Stoicism for the state so that each individual realizes they still matter? They have a core, they have an inner citadel, but at the same time, they're part of that society. They're not withdrawn. They see their function with the family, with their state, with the cosmos. So totally just went off on a tangent there. That's kind of where the philosophy thing led to.
I mean, but such an amazing foundation because I did not find Socrates early on. I found actually what Socrates taught that I've now since learned as I've immersed myself into philosophy is questioning uncertainty. And all of these different times throughout history, the individuals that separate themselves it was questioning what was happening and why. And of course, you don't want that from a government level, from a state level. This is happening and why. Maybe there's sometimes justifiable reasons for it, but at the individual level, when it comes to justice and differentiating good from bad, if you're not questioning yourself and you're just acting, you're gonna steer off the path. And Socrates laid the foundation for truly question everything in the way that you beautifully described. I could convince you you're wrong in anything if we just peel it deep enough and give exception to every rule. Um, yeah, so that was an awesome history of how we got to Stoicism in general and how you found it in the first place. Short story for me, by the way. The first book that I ever read, well, knowingly read, intentionally read on philosophy. Because if I was told to read philosophy back in the day, in one ear out the other, I was a punk kid that like would laugh at it. Like you're asking a bunch of questions, just default to action. Quit asking questions, like basically doing the opposite of what philosophy can entail for action doers, but still having the rational mind behind the why. But the first book that I ever read was by Donald Robertson, How to Think Like a Roman Emperor on Marcus Aurelius. So Donald Robertson was my entry point, who of course writes on Substack.
How old were you?
How old was I? It was in it was during COVID. Oh yeah, so I had read some other books again in Guam when I was doing all the resilience training stuff in the self improvement, self help realm, but never if it was philosophy intertwined in any way or stoicism, it was not for that reason. Donald Robertson reading about Marcus Aurelius. I can't remember why I found it, but it was when I was journaling and writing when everything was shut down. So half my time was writing for that reason, and then the other time was for learning the job while everything was remote and shut down. So it's a very interesting time, but a very beneficial time for my development, both in mind and body, because there wasn't anything else to do, and why not get after it mentally and physically?
So
Um,
that was COVID. When did you do the Navy resilience training, and what is that? Because I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah. So in 2007, the DoD tasked every branch of service with standing up a program primarily for stress management. So in response to high rates of burnout across the DoD, both with, of course, active duty, civilian contractor, independents, they were tasked with standing up a program. The Navy and Marine Corps stood up combat operational stress control. But it's so funny to hear you say that. So you've never heard of it. Of course, you're in the teams, and you guys are getting after it. So this is more going to be shore-based commands getting this. And to be fair, op from an operational perspective, people typically struggled more when they came back to a shore-based command and had to get all the mundane administrative bullshit aspects of the job when they know what's happening overseas, where anyone who's operational on the ground just wants to get back and support their brothers and sisters in arms. And so that's a challenging time. And of course, in response to any challenging time, being reflective and having tools to start looking into things. And there's so many good things about the program. Of course, its genesis in general is pure. But like with any formalized program, there's a lot of acronyms, a lot of tools that I'm not a big fan of. But I went into it a year into my service because I've always been passionate about stress management just due to my past with family and other issues of people struggling. And just why are some people inherently resilient and other people's not in response to the same stressor, even though I didn't have the terminology for it. Um, so yeah, that was in 2007, but I was trained in 2014 and was just basically an active participant for 3 or 4 years, and then joined the leadership team in Guam, started teaching material, and very quickly was asked by their lead to take over because they would love a non-mental health professional to be the lead of that, and then brought my flavor to it, and we grew it and did some cool things. And then again, I didn't start weaving in because now a lot of presentations I'll give will have philosophy. They'll have reflective questions. They'll have quotes from Socrates or from Epictetus, and then we'll do exercises based on that and talk about dichotomy of control and these other concepts that have been around forever that have influenced everything that we do in the medical sector, in education, and a lot of our great minds today. We stand on the shoulders of giants, and yeah, I didn't realize the influence Socrates had until actually Donald Robertson wrote the recent book, How to Think Like Socrates. And I didn't find you on Substack until you wrote that piece about Socrates and his combat history and how it probably influenced his thinking. And like all of your pieces, you do such a great job of looking at history, sometimes bringing in your own modern experience with it, and then asking a lot of questions, very Epictetus light, which is, I mean, obviously the name of your account is What Then? And that's when I found you. So Donald Robertson shared your post and saying he had never thought about it like that, and how that screams. I don't think he said screams, but how it's most likely very true because you experienced that kind of war and that kind of just crazy nature, like you said, of people eating each other and what war is. And of course, he wasn't sitting there for 24 hours not eating and thinking during war. He was acting. But when you get back to make sense of it and to pursue forward, he set the foundation for how we can both deliver, but also sustain that ability to deliver through rationality, questioning, and evolving what is many forms of philosophy. So you found Socrates first. I, I believe your favorite philosopher, at least. I mean, you've caused me, by the way, you're writing. I mentioned I was going to go back and read your old post. The reasons I haven't is I'm rereading Discourses. I read it before, but I don't think I was ready to read it when I read it. Like I was just generating my ability to like read philosophy and consider questions well, and really ponder it in my life or how I would write about it or teach it to other people. So I'm rereading it now and I'm highlighting it. But as I'm reading it, holy shit, Sam! Like it's so funny when I'm reading your work now. Or like the influence of his writing into yours, it's very loud and very cool because it's different but similar. When did you find Epictetus? And speak to that a little bit if you can.
I don't even remember when I found him. Um, I gotta say, it's only been a couple years. Like the moment I read it, I'm like, this guy is my blood brother. Like I share a kinship with this guy. Radically different in the sense that he was obviously a slave, and his sole goal in life was to achieve freedom at all costs. And because he lived as a slave, he lived in a brutal world. Um, his freedom was found internally, and his like I'm I share the kinship with the man, but like by essence, he was a slave. I was a combatant. So where he leans back, I lean in. So like I look at his philosophy and I see the beauty in it, and I try to take it and make it a proactive philosophy. I don't think that's not necessarily wrong to do because every Stoic we read has their own take. Marcus Aurelius took Epictetus and made it his own. Seneca had his own out there, and he obviously didn't live the Stoic creed. You could say he died that way, which is great, but like there was a lot of built-in contradiction there, which is why he's such like a wily character.
Who was I saying?
And
Who was I do?
yeah, Rufus was totally different. Chrissy was totally different. So like there's a lot of differences out there. But Epictetus, his ability to just like gruffly cut through bullshit and through the right use of questions that are ethically charged, get you to just completely re-examine yourself. And he can do it in such a brutal way that you love him more for doing it. That is a gift. Like people will study him not just for his philosophy, but how he actually taught. Because it probably took him 50, 60 years to be able to communicate the way he did. That will be in your face, that will be ruthless, and yet get you to say, this was the best experience of my life. That's probably why Arian dedicated years of his life to sitting there on the floor writing down what this man said. I love it so much that I learned ancient Greek to be able to read it in the original. So I basically hired a PhD student getting his PhD in some obscure aspect of Aristotle to teach me how to Koine Greek, which is cool because both Epictetus and the New Testament are written in Koine Greek, so I could kind of do both. But yeah, he definitely influenced the way I think, the way I write, the way I like self crucify myself to get down to what's going on, what's wrong. there's a reason why people still talk about this guy 2,000 years later, because he got to the essence. And when you read the discourses, every single sentence is ethically charged, is examining, and doesn't do it with any fluff. And he makes it fun because every analogy he throws at you is like, oh man, that's great. Whether it's like comical analogy, whether he's talking about sheep or figs or whatever, he makes it nonstop amusing. I can only imagine what it was like to sit on his stoa and listen to him talk every single day.
Completely agree. And like you said, he's funny too. And like the hypotheticals he comes up with, I mean, like you said, for Aaron to sit and write all of that in the way that he did, every day must have been so profound. Because of course you're taking notes. I mean, and like just to think of when I read something that I love or hear someone say things that I love and like wanting to write it down, like it seems like that was every day when you're around Epictetus. And Rufus is another one that I really enjoy, which is of course his teacher. Sometimes like when he quotes him or when I read the few things I have with Rufus, he reminds me of like some of the previous generations where almost even less bullshit. He's like calling him slave right to the point. He's very big into voluntary discomfort. Zero fluff, zero hypotheticals. This is the way it is. And then Epictetus takes that, makes it his own, and then evolves it even more to where it's even more accessible to many. But I love that Rufus was his teacher. As he was growing. And then he did a lot of this in his later years, of course, most of his life being a slave, and then living it, learning it, and then applying it to all. And in many ways, you could argue that's what's happening with you, living it, learned it after the fact. So I was wondering, like, when you found philosophy, and now toward the end of your career in the military, at the start of your private career, before you went to Columbia, and probably a pretty good time to find it too, because I can imagine that transition from deployment with your brothers to the classroom, going from maintenance of physical safety around the world to a discussion of psychological safety in the classroom, probably was pretty challenging. Just the dichotomy. What was that time like?
It was rough. I said it before. I think the transition out of the military was harder than the transition into the military, because I went from my last tour was 9 months to a really remote tribal region of Afghanistan, and it was me and a platoon of SEALs, so about 16 guys. We had a couple Army guys help take care of the base. We lived in tents. So like that was it for 9 months, and it was extremely kinetic. During the day, we would work with the locals, help them establish security governance development. And at night, we would conduct operations. And it was just this endless, aggressive, get after it. One of the best 9 months of my life, like in a weird way. And then a month after getting back, I was in a classroom in Columbia University in Manhattan. Didn't know anybody, no brothers, no tribe, no continuity. Just trying to figure out what I meant. It was aside from the 2 months I went to college after high school, it was the first time I sat in a classroom. That was necessary for my own growth because the SEAL teams are pretty homogenous. You get guys with different belief systems and stuff, but most of them are they look like me, they talk like me, they want to fight like me. And then going to Columbia, we would have people from dozens of countries, totally different backgrounds, people who grew up in ways I couldn't even imagine with you know private schools, done Ivy League undergrads, and all this other stuff. That was like crucial for my growth. But at the same time, I was trying to figure out, what did I just lose? How do I get that back? How do I get back a path? How do I build another tribe? And it was difficult. Philosophy was crucial, and that ultimately led to me staying in touch with some of my buddies from the teams who were going through something similar. And we all ended up deciding to quit our jobs and work together, which totally different subject.
Yeah. I I love talking about the concepts of fulfillment versus pleasure. When I do some of the presentations I give, and when I talk to guys like you and here, obviously, uh, we don't want war. Like you wouldn't go back and do those 9 months again just for fun, but you were doing it because you had to. That was the job that you were
No,
doing.
I did it because I wanted to.
You did. Oh, well, you were in the service because you wanted to, but obviously, war is not a state that we want to persist forever and be a. But that's some of the best times of your life, and obviously some of the most difficult times too. You were doing it because you wanted to, but it's also like most people would say that would be extremely challenging to do. Not only to get to be able the chance to do it, to go through buds, become a SEAL, but then to live in a tent for 9 months, be at war, while dealing with training of local tribes and all the other things that came with it. Whereas you come back stateside, and then we have instant access to pleasure, and we're talking about these concepts without actually having doing them. The dichotomy I think about all the time of what we pursue. It's cool to see how you took a challenging transition, challenging time in the classroom, and ultimately made it fulfilling for you, leading to another job, but making that time educational for you, and then finding philosophy to derive meaning and purpose out of that when it maybe felt like it had been lost during a very impactful career that you had. Those concepts, I continually think about how do you apply them to individuals in their unique circumstances, particularly when you look at what's challenging versus what isn't, because learning, growing, anything, you don't have that without frustration, discomfort. I mean, if you're comfortable, if you're seeking pleasure all the time, it's great that we have access to that, and for sure enjoy your days, find some pleasurable things. But if you're not quote unquote suffering, for lack of a better term, in your respective ways to get better, you're not going to look back on your life proud of that. You're not going to have fulfilling memories. You're just going to live passively, and then before you know it, be suffering passively as well, because you have no meaning, you have no purpose. I kind of got away from where I was going initially, but when I hear you, individuals like you, look back on objectively challenging times, but subjectively some of the best times in your life. That's it's a nice thing to hear, where we know when you look back on your individual trials, you can make them some of the most impactful times of your lives, and then move forward to embrace other forms of adversity.
Yeah, it radically changed the way I view the world. So I wanted the thing that only war could provide. So I got that. And then I came back, and I remember walking down the street in Manhattan being like, "Hey, this is a gift. Like, I'm not at risk of having my legs blown off walking down the sidewalk." And I'd walk around looking around. I'm like, I see there's quite a few miserable people in Manhattan. That's like, it's well known for being a bunch of assholes. People working their asses off. People who are just, I'm like, hey, you just be grateful for what you have here. And then I noticed within myself that idea started to atrophy. And I just felt this general sense of unease, and how quickly we forget what it is, this thing we have here in America, throughout the West and the developed world. It is truly a gift, but it's also a paradox, because with that comes forgetting or never even knowing what it is not to have it. Just how horrific life can be. And part of the beauty of Stoicism, of Epictetus, because he's ruthless about it, visualize those worst case scenarios. Think about it. Put yourself through those trials. Make yourself uncomfortable. You don't really know what it is to be comfortably warm without knowing what it is to be like brutally cold. And that's easy stuff to implement, so you get the best of that hard world. Like if you wanted to do the sauna and the cold plunge, for example, which we've talked about before, that's a great way to tap into it and say, "God, I just sat in 35-degree waters. That sucked. I feel like a god now that it's done. What a wonderful day. My body's pumping all these awesome hormones. I feel great. Let me get some sun on my skin and warm up." It is a great way to reframe and continue to be grateful for what this truly is as a gift, without, to your point, living in a state of perpetual war just to feel like you're alive. And I could only imagine, one of my favorite thinkers is Eric Hoffer, and he wrote The True Believer. I tell everybody to read that book. It's an incredible book. One of my favorite thinkers, incredible guy. I actually just watched a documentary on him, and I don't watch things that authors write because I'm afraid I'm not going to like them. And he was instantly likable. The way he communicates, his passion in his words. He was probably in his 70s in that video, and he was just getting after it. You could tell he loved being alive. But his whole thing was the inability for many people to handle the burden of freedom. Because when you're free, when nature doesn't rule your life, when war doesn't rule your life, you're left with yourself. And if you're not comfortable with that self, if you don't have a purpose for it, if you don't have meaningful work, if you don't have a creative faculty, something passionate, you might just seek to escape that self. And one way you can do that is through what he calls a mass movement. It could be an ideological crusade. It could be a nationalistic movement like Nazism or communism. It could be a religious movement. It's just something that where you escape yourself, obliterate that self, and join a larger collective to merge with that thing. And it's a brilliant idea. He invented the concept, and he calls the person who falls for that a true believer. And that raises, he doesn't propose a solution to it. He's just diagnosing, but it raises an interesting question. How do we make sure that doesn't happen? And America, for instance, is built in such a way where life is of such a decent quality that you can almost, it's very difficult for a mass movement to gain speed here. And because there's opportunities to find meaningful work, passionate work, and get after it. Um, I just talked so much, I totally forgot your question.
No, no, you are definitely answering it, because we were talking about pleasure and fulfillment, and like in our perpetually abundant, easy times, access to pleasure, it's easy to get lost in the sauce, and then to feel like you're suffering because you're not actively getting after it. You're not finding purpose, you're not finding meaning. And again, I just actually bought True Believer, so you're adding a lot of things to my reading list. But again, I have resources that are I find credible, including yourself, that I'm happy to add to that reading list. So I'm gonna have to watch that documentary too, because I read a few pieces on him recently. And yeah, I was not hip to Eric, so I'm very excited to read that one.
His
Um,
style, man, his style is it's short, it's punchy, it's aphoristic. Like you could almost see his smile reading his writing because of the way he communicates ideas. True Believer is a freight train hammer. It's not like his other writings where he's kind of journaling a little bit, but like it gets the point across. So yeah, that ties into the bigger picture there. That raises the question: how do you fill in that void, which for many people feels like a void? That's like the basis of existential philosophy, and they would suggest when you feel that anxiety of having to own yourself, make something of yourself in freedom without succumbing to something like a mass movement or wanting to go back to the pre-state world, you got to lean into it. If you feel anxiety, you feel depression, lean into that shit and understand that it's signifying that some work has to be done. And that's why it's sometimes I'll branch into the existential, which like it gets abstract, but it is a beautiful study, and it's insightful into the human condition because what we have here, this gift of ease, going back to the example of walking down the street and all of a sudden I don't feel it anymore. It to keep it, you have to keep it in your mind that this thing has to be earned every day. Otherwise, we lose it. We end up in a mass movement, and things don't look good anymore. And then it becomes a fight to gain it back again. It's that cycle that Eric Hoffer articulates. It's so powerful and it's so true. So I hope you enjoy it.
yeah, looking forward to it for sure. And just to remember that gift, as you mentioned, like if someone like you can lose that gift in less than a year after coming from what you did in the teams, obviously for us that have not experienced actual war, boots on the ground, it's very easy to lose track of it too. But what you write very well about, what I try to write about as well, is pursuing discomfort on purpose, giving yourself those wins, giving yourself that perspective is absolutely a way to do that. You get out of that cold plunge, and the feeling you have, the gratitude you have, the change in lens that you have in response to other adversities that day will be different. Now, don't get me wrong, we can change our perspective on the current state, current adversities that we have in modern day by reading about history. History repeats itself in many ways, and you can see how awful things were not too long ago, like you were mentioning with Socrates. But having that knowledge is only one thing, and you can know it, but it's very hard to practice it. So the action is imperative. So I love reading, but you can read all the books in the world and have knowledge, but without application, without your own unique wisdom, it's not going to translate well. And like you were saying, burnout, anxiety, frustration, these are all things that people sit on, they label themselves with, and of course, culturally, we promote it for good reason, but unfortunately, we help people victimize themselves. Where if you're feeling that way, those are feelings are signals. They are opportunities, like you said, for work. So pursuing that work is actually quite simple. It's just not easy. Getting in that cold plunge is not easy, but the act of it or setting it up is quite simple. And there's so many ways that you can pursue discomfort in many different domains. But where I'm becoming more and more obsessed is like the mindset behind it. Like someone who is physically active, your reasons behind training can really change how you respond in other domains. Like if
Can
I'm
you dig into like sorry to cut you off, but like your resilience? Can you dig into if like the overarching philosophy and how you look at that in terms of mind, body, and soul?
100%. Um, so I'm actually another book that I'm reading right now alongside Discourses is Anti-Fragility, and which I'm finding very entertaining. Taleb is also hilarious writer. I mean, I'm only a quarter way in the book, and he's very funny in how he writes. But I love the concepts and what he's getting at when it comes to resilience. And in the physical domain, resilience is bouncing back. Like something that's resilient, it doesn't get better from adversity, but it also doesn't get worse. Fragile, of course, things get worse because of adversity. Anti-fragile, things gain because of disorder. And like you mentioned, if perpetual war, eventually that's going to take its toll. Perpetual stress of any kind, eventually it's going to take its toll. So I believe in the human domain, resilience is the ability to effectively manage and then eventually overcome stress. Stress is neither good nor bad. We know what that is. It's more what do you perceive the stress is. Even the worst things in the world, like you said, you let war give you a perspective of the gift of life. You experiencing that change your perspective on what all things are. It made you better in every way, and some of the most fulfilling times of your life, which is just so cool to hear. But resilience applied, we're all born that way. Michael Easter just wrote a few good pieces on it, and people write on it all the time. Like we are naturally even anti-fragile when it comes to viruses and exposures to them at small levels. We can get better and inoculate ourselves. Stress inoculation, a big term used in the military. Of course, if we want to get stronger, we lift weights. If you train, you have to pursue struggle in order to expand. But that mindset is what I'm trying to get at for mental resilience and human resilience. You'll find some exceptional individuals in a certain domain have a very hard time translating physical resilience to emotional or social or other domains of their life where they have all the tools, but those concepts are not translating well because it's maybe technique based, or I train to run because I want to win marathons rather than when I train to run, I'm dealing with what's happening in my mind and body and my soul to balance that shit out. And of course, if it applies to competition, great. But my reason for training would be how can I be a better man, a better husband, a better father, and a better competitor? And just a shift in how you approach things, at least for me anecdotally, has changed my life in countless ways. And it has made me better at work, better at home. And I've done some pretty cool things athletically, which is a joke when you talk about professional athletes or military operations. Like individuals get after it overseas so I can do stupid things, physical challenges back home. And I'm very lucky for that. I know I'm in uniform, but I'm a big believer that my role in the military is I'm serving those who serve. But at the same time, how we approach life anywhere, what is your intention behind it? What is your why? And having the lens of resilience to use intentional stress is the concept that I like to apply. I didn't know it when I talked about it, but voluntary discomfort, like from Rufus and others, just reapplied, repackaged. But I like the word intention and everything because when we're awake, a lot of us live pretty passively. We let our routines lead the way. We let our emotions lead the way. We let our reactions lead the way. I believe we're a culmination of our skills. So everything that we do, say, and think is derived from past experience, genetics, and other schemas that we've developed, or just the emotional mind and where it can go based on whatever's coming at us, stimulus and then a reaction. But if we're living consciously, if we're living with intention behind first and foremost, knowing where we are and where we want to go, then we can apply ourselves more effectively. But stress, intentional stress, I like bringing that word in because as many words these days, and you've done a good job, like with burnout and other terms, that they are primed for reframing. And stress has been, I know I grew up thinking stress was bad. If someone is experiencing too much stress, they're going to get sick, they're going to have a mental health disorder, and they're going to be in trouble. And while that is true, if you never recover from it, I wasn't looking at the other side. I wasn't even thinking about, no, of course, I'm playing football, I'm playing basketball, I'm doing all these things and intentionally working out to get better. I'm causing stress to make myself better. So stress, again, I want to say intentional stress, pursuing stress on purpose in a certain domain and allowing it to benefit yourself. That has been what I'm trying to get at with writing about resilience, apply it to my life and then teaching others. So you'll see that term from me all the time and challenges that I write because I really want to use that frame to expand resilience outside of whatever domain somebody's pretty good in and where the real opportunities are, where they're not. My favorite intentional stress challenge that I always start with is what we've been talking about, self-reflection. Sitting back on knowing yourself. That is not easy. We are very lucky to have the opportunity to do that, to think about what is our purpose? How are we going to transcend our life, meaning, and all these things? You think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. A lot of people operate on that foundation. They don't have time for questions. They are acting, they are surviving. And then naturally, they're actually going into stress and recovering and oftentimes more fulfilled particularly when they're working in a tribe in the way that you write about ancestrally, how people have hunter gatherers and other civilizations that have worked well in that domain. But today's day and age, that's hard work. Knowing what am I doing well? Where am I coming up short? What are my weaknesses? What are my fears? And then thinking about how can I progressively and systematically build upon them. There's so much opportunity there. And why I'm a big fan of writing is because you can apply that. And when you get your thoughts onto paper, or as you've heard, my method is thumbs to phone, unfortunately, but anything objectively outside of your head in front of you, to see what is in your mind, now we can start recreating our story and building upon it. I went off in multiple directions
No,
there.
no, you're writing on resiliency. It's powerful shit. And I think the post yesterday in which your mom wrote some parables basically of your childhood, it almost made it sound like you were just naturally that way. And I wonder if that's the case or if you had some incidences that encouraged you to start to think this way from an early age.
It's a great question. I tell this story on a few lives recently, but I'll tell it again. My sister is a social worker, and she had a project in school of creating a family tree. And her family tree, after she made it, they were then tasked with color coding the names in that family tree in a variety of ways to indicate mental health disorders, substance abuse disorders, socioeconomic problems, and all these other considerations that they have in their line of work to better understand a situation. And we joked that our family tree was lit up like a Christmas tree. So a lot of colors on it. So yeah, I observed, I did not have a traumatic child experience, but maybe I do based on how I want to look at it. If I want to apply the different lens that we can apply to anyone's life in any way. I mean, you could argue that traumatic children experiences would be parents who helicopter and prevent all forms of stress. That can be way more traumatic than a kid who grows up in a single parent home with drugs outside of the house and all kinds of other quote unquote stressors around them. Of course, there are terrible stories on both sides, and there's exceptional stories on both sides. I had loving parents. I had a really good life coming up, but yeah, I saw some shit, I guess. And I do believe, again, with my reading and just my own personal perspective, that apt aptitude for resilience comes from prior experience in your life, whether it's as a kid and you were exposed to things knowingly or not. Of course, as adults, same thing. And you can derive your own experiences. You can volunteer to join the military and become a SEAL and experience war and have an experience that shifts your life and your ability to make impact even beyond career, for sure. I believe it is support systems. We are very lucky in today's day and age to have a lot of objective support systems out there, whether that is the different crisis hotlines, of course, anything that you can find online. There's a lot of cool tools for that. But then even in communities, and then at a smaller level, or communities that you're a part of, the hobbies and the groups that you hang out with, your family, your friends, your significant other, these are all support systems. I'm a big fan of saying not only objective support systems, but your perceived support systems are crucial. So that is a worthwhile reflection as well. Thinking back on who can I go to for support when shit hits the fan in a particular way, and knowing that can just encourage resilience in and of itself. And then last, develop strategies. I did not have those growing up. I did not cope well. I went through phases in my life with very poor coping strategies, and luckily made it through. Intentionality and training behind strategies to help you with fulfillment and answering the call for whatever life throws at you. That's where I try to write most on these days, developing those strategies.
So if you kind of zoom out back to our early discussion about stoicism, everybody seems to resonate to a particular stoic. Is there one that that has most strongly influenced you, and why? Is it the style? Is it the certain ethical focus? What is it?
Rufus is, I mean, the one that comes to mind from past Roman Stoics. I like Epictetus is who I think about more. I'm reading him more lately, and whose quotes there are more, of course. There's just more information with Epictetus that I found than Rufus in the few books that I've had. But his quotes, particularly on voluntary discomfort, just resonate well with me. So I try to apply that mindset. I love brutally honest, cut to the chase philosophy, which is why Rufus and Epictetus are two of my favorites. Of course, Marcus Aurelius is who everyone's going to say, but I also like thinking about modern Stoics, even though like they're not termed that, or they don't even. And maybe we'll learn that someone like James Stockdale read Epictetus and brought him to the camps in Vietnam. We'll learn about Teddy Roosevelt and some of his past readings. So I like knowing that some of these leaders and warfighters had stoicism in their lives, but you don't hear people walking around saying I'm a Stoic that are typically actual Stoics, but I like thinking about modern ones. But to answer your question succinctly, Rufus and Epictetus, based on the lens. Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's one thing about Epictetus. Not once anywhere in the discourses does he ever call himself a Stoic or even a philosopher for that matter. It was always phrased as a hypothetical. If I were a Stoic, if I were good enough to have attained that status, if I were good enough to become a philosopher, that's the sort of humility that it takes. I think anybody who does refer to themselves as such is probably selling something.
Teach his own for sure. Well intentions. And also we know where tensions can go when applied incorrectly. But it's an honor to be called that, and I'm not a big fan of looking for external validation. If someone were to call you that, but also who gives a shit? Because Stoicism and philosophy in general is an act. It's an application over time, and you can come up short. Everyone's going to fuck up on a given day, but when it comes to like legacy that you leave, I'm not sure like being called a stoic while you're alive is even beneficial for you in the first place. Definitely not calling yourself that or even anyone else. That's a legacy that you leave after you're gone. And then at that point, who gives a shit? Uh, I mean, I do want to transcend and leave something behind, but it's not for what you put on my gravestone. It's not what people call me. I don't care about that. But the impact that you make while you have the opportunity to do so. Some of my favorite philosophers, both anciently and more modern times, they've been more about action than they've been about labels.
Yeah. Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree.
Yeah. I'm curious, talking about voluntary discomfort and intentional stress, what ways post military career, I mean, you have your primary job, you write. I do want to talk about writing a little bit too. But before that, you balance multiple things in your lives these days. How do you like to get after it these days on top of everything that you're balancing?
Like physical.
Sure. Anything. Like, and from the concept of voluntary discomfort, what ways are you consistently applying that concept in your life these days?
Um quite a different way. I missed the like extremity of physical activity from the teams. So I try to hit that in a way that's going to allow me to go all out, but still attain some aspect of longevity. So my program has a mixture of max effort lifting, zone five, breathing, but coupled with a lot of prehab and rehab. So you've got the max, the dynamic effort, super high rep, lightweight stuff with bands, stuff I would have like scoffed at 10 years ago, but now is paying dividends. So that's the physical aspect. I try to be outside as much as humanly possible. I want sun on my skin. Unfortunately, I live in Pennsylvania, which is too cloudy too often, but I want sun on my skin. I want to be outside with the dog. And then the hot and the cold. The hot and the cold is a game changer because you can max that out every day and feel like a god after. So like the sauna, the cold, as many iterations as you want, different intensities, different temperatures. That is like the ultimate reset. So if you have a difficult day at work or you're working through a hard problem, you go in there and your entire world is reduced to breath. Everything is reduced down to every sensation of an inhale and then exhale. And there's nothing left for the brain. There's nothing left for the body. It's all just about survival mode. And it is a form of meditation, like a forced form of meditation. And then you just kind of just ease out of that once your body recovers from the pain of the hot and the cold. And it seems like everything just settles. Dots are connected. Whatever problem you're working through or thinking through is coming together. Whatever thing was stressing you out and getting you down, and your body was pumping adrenaline, all that stuff just got flushed out. Because as you sweat up, you drink 64 ounces of water before you get in the sauna. That's out already. Replace the 64 ounces. Your body and your mind just got completely refreshed. So kind of broad spectrum from the actual physical training, trying to do something physical throughout every day, walk as much as humanly possible, and then the hot and the cold. I think that's kind of how I hit it.
Love it. And I love that forced meditation because it's so true. I mean, you get into these extremes with either direction on temperature. And if you do anything else, you're just compromising your ability to stay in. Like I've tried at those edges that you operate, particularly with the cold. If I start talking to somebody when I'm at the coldest of temperatures I'll get into, my body starts convulsing. Because I'm not dialed in on my breathing, and I get away from it because I try to be cool and act like I'm not affected by it. And I start talking, and I lose control of my body. I look like I'm having a seizure. I'll stay in, but it gets more painful. It's hard, and your body, you just get away from your ability to endure those limits. And of course, I mean, you'll see evidence on both sides of the spectrum for cold, whether it's beneficial or not. So, like when I talk about intentional stress challenges for cold exposure, maybe it's physically beneficial. What we do know is, as long as you're not a moron and like go hop in some Arctic ocean and then drown, you sit in a tub that's cold, you're not hurting yourself. And what is absolutely true is you're doing something difficult on purpose. And I don't care if that is turning your shower to cold at the end for 30 seconds and then getting out and still feeling that electricity going through your
Yep.
veins, and then start somewhere manageable, but progressively overload that stimulus once you get a little bit more comfortable with what made you originally uncomfortable. And then before you know it, you're hopping in the cold in the 30s and holding it for 3 minutes or whatever time you're doing while maintaining your breathing. And it doesn't take long to do that with consistency, intention, and effort. And I love the idea of that skill development in any domain, but the return on investment for a few minutes in the cold, like you said, you get out and you feel like you're levitating. I feel like I could move, like there's electricity in my veins. And again, if you do that to start your day, or if you know it's coming later that day, it just reframes bullshit. It
Yep.
reframes what feels important. But that's true of any voluntary discomfort. Whether you meditate on death, whether you reflect on your life and opportunities. I love all of these different potential considerations. So it's accessible to anybody of what ways can I drive that stress response up a little bit to make things a little bit easier, unrelated to what I did intentionally to make things harder.
That's well said. How do you structure your day from the physical activity, the hot, the cold, and so on?
Variable. So I have a baby coming in a month. So depending on the wife's doing the night that she had, I mean, knock on all the freaking wood. I have three children right now, 7.5-year old, 5.5-year old, and a 3.5-year old. My 3.5-year old, mini me, looks like me, acts like me. Maybe that's why he drives me a little crazier than the other two did, but he's also a wild man. So he's gone through sleep regressions. When we moved here in 2020, this is when I was able to I couldn't train. I love Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I've been training for 8 years, and all the gyms were shut down. And I had a buddy challenge me to go after a burpee world record, and so I trained for that. I thought I was going to do the hour one, but then the 3 minute one looked a little bit more possible, and I was able to get that. And it's a very like fun time in my life to reflect back on because it was hard. We had a newborn, my middle child at home, my 3-year-old daughter. COVID was crazy. Figuring out a new job remotely was weird. And having that morning, because my daughter was an early bird, but she was a chill early bird, not like my 3-year-old son right now. Um, and so we would go downstairs and she and I would play for 5 minutes. I'd get her set up and then I would work out and then we'd play some more after, well before my son and wife would get up. And that was 6 months of really hard training during a really hard time. But the rest of the day just felt that much easier. And then sometimes I would do sauna after that. Usually I would wait for nap time to do sauna and cold. Do you have an ice bath, like an actual like cold plunge or one of the similar brands?
Yeah, it's a cold plunge that actually makes ice, so it gets 32 degrees.
Oh yeah. So you have a barrel sauna too, right?
Yeah.
You have the goals. So that's what I plan to get when I'm not moving around. I don't know. We're not going to settle in Maryland. I'm trying to stay here as long as I can. But I just have a steam tent that you get on Amazon, cover the top, sit inside of it, and bake. I Jimmy rigged a red light sauna, so bought some lights on Amazon, and then got a different tent, set that up. It does the trick. Both work. You can stay in the red light a lot longer than you can stay in the steam tent, which is
Yeah.
fun. Actually, base they shut down their saunas during COVID, but they just started them back up. So I do have a dry sauna now, and
Nice.
getting in there, the dry sauna after doing steam for so long, different stimulus, still a lot of heat, but I it says it can't get up to more than 150 in the steam. I got in at 200 recently and sat in there, which was fun because it was packed full of dudes, and it felt much easier than I remember it feeling when I was doing dry saunas in Guam or before that. But I've been doing the steam one where I'm packed in basically in the fetal position inside of this little tent covering the top. But yeah, that's a fun time to reflect back on. To answer your question for modern day, it depends on the day. Usually I do like small physical activity. I like writing about a daily challenge that I do on Substack. So whatever that daily challenge is, that's going to be my physical way to get after it in the morning. It's going to be less than 10 minutes in some way. Um, Typically my crazy son is up just a few minutes after me. So he is not as easy to work out during the morning. So I've gotten away from the hard physical activity in the morning,
Mm.
and now it's during nap time, if I'm home or when I'm at work. I'll train and coach jujitsu in the evenings or MMA based on the class. Uh, yeah, so I don't have consistency when it comes to the heat and the cold, but for physical activity, small win in the morning, and then the harder workouts usually in the afternoon.
You said you coach jujitsu?
I do. So I've done it for 8 years. I'm a brown belt. Got a buddy who's a black belt that owns a gym, and I'm just one of the coaches that help out there.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome.
I love it. I found that in Guam. Yeah, we got to Guam in 2016, and have you ever been through Guam? You guys ever transit through there? Yeah. Cool island. I was at Camp Lejeune for my first duty station, and the island of Guam is smaller than the base of Camp Lejeune, which is wild. So you can drive across in about half an hour. But per capita, this culture out there, just amazing people in a variety of ways. But mixed martial arts and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, very prevalent on that island. I'm talking 8 gyms probably now. When I was there was 4 gyms, kind of 2 or 3 that were primary, and I bounced around a couple of them and found a home in one that was primarily MMA, but they had a lot of the older heads on the island who are amazing guys that were big into jiu-jitsu, and they were just about to open up a new gym. Uh, so I started training with them, and yeah, fell in love. And we got to Guam and got pregnant within a month, and unfortunately lost that child. Very hard time. And you don't realize like how common loss of life is in children, like miscarriages, until you experience it. So we're on the other side of the world, uh, responding to this, have some great support, but we're obviously disconnected from that sport objectively, which is especially hard on my wife. But I had already, when I knew I had a child coming, I had already gotten into MMA and jiu-jitsu. So I'm training twice a day around work, and I'm in a hospital this time with a patient schedule, so I don't have some of the flexibility I do now. Um, with my roles at Patuxent River, but um, that I loved it, and that's how I was coping. But it made it really challenging for my wife and I. I thought I was showing up with physical acts and making sure everything was fine at home, but she just needed me physically there. And that was a trial for us that thankfully we answered well, and it formed us into the marriage that we have now. And we were pregnant from that loss to when she became pregnant within a month. But I reflect back on that time, felt like a year. Every day was tough. I was coping in my own way, but I was coping through diving into the job, diving into jiu-jitsu, coming home and doing everything I could where I just wasn't emotionally connecting. At that point in my life, I wasn't good at talking about that kind of shit. Um, I would let my wife talk, but I wouldn't talk, and she just needed to know that I was hurting, and coping my own way. But yeah, so then when my daughter was coming, I was still doing quite a bit of MMA, and I'd come home, black eyes, swollen ears. So my wife's pregnant with my daughter, and she has tough pregnancies. She gets quite hormonal. And I just remember one time I came home pretty beat up, and she just broke into tears like, what in the fuck are you doing? And I had done a few like just smokers, if you will, or just fights in the gym where I actually took a fight formally, yeah, but that was coming quick. And she was like, I didn't marry a fighter. And so I was planning for an upcoming fight. She's like, what happens when you win this fight? Because I know you, I know what's going to happen next. How can you do the next step up? And I'm like, that's fair. But also at this time, I realized my dad was a collegiate wrestler. I've always liked fucking around boxing and striking, so I wasn't too bad in either one of those realms. If it went to the ground, I was drowning. I was getting my ass kicked, no matter what level somebody was. I was getting kicked to shit in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And so I was leaning more into getting better there, and it was around that time that I pivoted primarily to jujitsu. And there's a 5:30 class 3 days a week, so I started going to that before work, and then not training in the evenings, and just kind of finding better harmony to show up for my family, which is why I trained in the first place, ironically. And yeah, it's been all she wrote since then. It's one of my favorite parts of my life outside of the home.
That's a great sport.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, when it comes to like radical subject shift, but writing, we were talking before this thing started. I can't imagine writing the way you do on the fly like that. Hit your process and how you kind of approach it.
Yeah, that's it's kind of what I just talked about. So my process is getting in when I can, because I don't have many waking hours with dedicated deep
Mm.
work, if you will, these days. So I did a post not too long ago, and like, productivity doesn't have hacks. Of course, scheduling deep work and setting aside that time when your life allows for it. Absolutely. And you need to even have like 5 minutes of, I'm fully immersed in this topic right now, or this subject, and I'm focused on nothing else. And you can get a lot of quality out of those minutes outside of bullshit quantity of hours where you're just passively there. Um, so I've become quite intentional in my ability to drive quality when I have moments to do so. So my process for writing is just simple notes on the iPhone, the same phone that I'm using for live right now. I have notes, and I have probably over 1,000 now. So when an idea comes to me, I throw down a very simple outline, and then I probably have 20 or 40 working pieces right now. But it's just like, when do I become inspired by it? I might never come back to it, but like when I find that inspiration, or when I intentionally think about the next intentional stress challenge, or the next workout of the week, or next concept I want to write on because it's relevant to my life or something I taught recently, I'll just start jamming. Unfortunately, I mean, it's fortunately for me in my life right now, because we were talking about your method. You're still pen to paper, which is what I want to get back to when I have more uninterrupted deep work. But literally, I'm writing in the morning sometimes with my son, my 3-year-old wild man, climbing on my back, uh, sitting on my lap. I mean, I love him dearly. He's with me everywhere I go. I mean, he was just outside the door trying to come in. If you could hear him not too
I could
long
hear
ago.
him. Yeah.
Apologize for the audio, guys, so you know I'm not lying. Yeah, he'll be sitting on my lap and like moving the phone out of the way because he wants to sit with me while he looks at a book or he watches a show in the morning. So my writing time is the morning. That's when I get the bulk of my writing done, because my brain slows down in the evening. I'm not as good, but I put the kids down. I hit the bed and pass out as soon as the kids are passing out. I'm smoked at the end of the day for a variety of reasons. Yeah, so my method is when I can get after it, but it's typically in the morning with a few distractions while I'm doing it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. It's a great way to do it on the fly.
Yeah. Writing for you. When did you begin writing? Not on Substack, but just for yourself, and kind of how that evolved to what you're doing now.
Had like a barbaric journal when I was in the military. I wish I took it more seriously back then. And then I didn't start writing until probably 2018. Around when I started digging deep into philosophy. I wrote, I wrote. I would start writing about books I was reading just to understand the book, kind of develop my mind, develop some mental models, and then I fell in love with an idea, which is an idea I'm still playing with on Substack. I actually wrote a book on it, and nobody will ever read that book. It's like my Old Testament. It's like the guide thing I go back to learn from, to reorient, to stay anchored on the idea. But that was really what kicked it off, because and going back to the Socratic conversation, writing that book made me realize how I didn't know shit, and I had to really start doing homework again. I actually really had to take reading seriously, diversify the sources, branch out from just the ancient philosophy, dig into the existentialists and so on. And then wrote personally for years. The idea of writing publicly terrified me. Like it absolutely terrified me, putting anything out there. I didn't have social media for forever, basically. So starting Substack at the beginning of 2024, no idea what I wanted to write about. And I figured, I loved Epictetus, so I'll start riffing on some Stoic essays. And then as I got comfortable with that, I kind of started playing with that overarching idea I wrote a book about. That's still my model. I'm working on that on the side. The process is, I try to keep it pen to paper. There's something meditative about it. If I could shut everything off, drown out work, drown out everything else, and just get down to that, like ink spilling on the paper, and trying to get these ideas out, and then after 45 minutes of pain, it starts to flow. It's like you just got to get through that horrible beginning part, and then the brain just opens up, and then the ideas start to connect. You start to see the threads. Everything you wrote before that 45-minute point is garbage, and then all of a sudden you see 2 or 3 good ideas, and then you start pulling those threads, and there's something awesome there, and that becomes what ultimately ends up becoming an essay for my Substack. What then? Um, it's it's a process that keeps changing. Like, I have no set way to do it, because if there was a set way, I would get bored with it in 2 weeks and stop doing it. So like it has to constantly stop or keep reiterating. And then throughout the day, kind of like you, random moments, like when I'm just driving and about to step out of the truck to go to the supermarket, or second I step into the shower, or the moment in the first 2 minutes in the sauna when I'm still sane, that all of a sudden the idea will pop up, because my subconscious was digesting this idea. What does it mean? How do I marry these two comparisons together? What is the actual principle, what I just wrote, so it has a point? Those are like the magical moments. And then you just got to write it down real quick, because my short-term memory is destroyed. And then it just ultimately comes back to the essay. That's kind of the evolution of the essay.
I love that. And if I'm lucky enough to outlive you, I'm going to be searching your house for that book. So then that can be like your. I'll share it with the world then if you decide not to throughout your life.
Yeah.
um, I mean, you basically just described intentional stress for writing. So like writing in public, agreed. I not only writing is something I was terrified of. Public speaking, I almost fainted in junior high talking in front of my friends. I was not prepared for a presentation. Hated doing it anyway, so I'd procrastinate because even, which is still true to this day, the process of creating like a PowerPoint slide or creating notes for a presentation, I fucking hate it. Like, I would much rather just talk from the heart live, which is what I do for most of the shit that I do now, and just reiterate maybe some existing slides. Making slides to present, I hate doing. Making notes to talk about, I don't like reading when I talk in public, but I hated talking in public for the longest time. Actively avoid it unless made to do it in school. Called up. I mean, everything went narrow, vision went blurry, losing control of my breath. I mean, I almost fainted. Teacher saved me, sat my ass down, dropped me a letter grade, and let me go the next week. But I kept avoiding presenting in public whenever I could through undergrad, which I had a thesis, a major research project, and bombed that. But I had done so much work, so they basically gave me a, a path just because I had done the work. I should not have passed that presentation, but it didn't really matter because it was a side venture anyway. But in grad school, I started getting serious about it. I was talking to patients all the time anyway, so just the reps behind it. And but still, at that point in grad school, I could write the answers to my questions, but writing for fun? Are you kidding me? Absolutely not. I've been surrounded by beautiful writers my whole life, and I've always loved reading. It wasn't COVID is what forced that out of me. It,
Mm.
it was it was not, again, reading philosophy. So like learning about these questions that are being asked. Some of these profound questions that Socrates will ask or Epictetus will pose with the like, you can think about it, sure, but to work through that, put in pen to paper, which it was pen to paper during COVID. My two kids at the time were more chill than my third child now, so I could write in a physical journal. I have them up here, but and a lot of my first posts on Substack, which is very funny to look back on your early work and see how it's evolved over time. But a lot of it was more or less copy and paste from my journal, and then maybe edit a few things, and yeah, writing in public is just a very weird process, and probably why I was very comfortable just posting and ghosting and not doing anything for a while, just making it the practice of getting it out there and letting that be the process for a while. Did that for 8 months, and it's been very fun now that I've tried to actively engage in the different ways, whether that's comments, community threads, and the other. Like, there's just so many incredible people on this platform and so many amazing writers to where I'm reading posts from you and all the people that we interact with often before I'm reading the books that I'm reading. And it's not because like I feel obligated to. It's because they're that good. Like these writers, these content creators in their different lanes. It's just amazing, and it's very fun to experience. But I'm sure all of us in some way, shape, or form, if we didn't come from journalism, if we didn't come from originally loving writing, it's very cool to see and hear the perspectives behind how that evolved over time. But the more you do anything, the better you get at it, the more comfortable you get at it. And it's still difficult. Like you said, that first 45 minutes, torture, just
Yeah.
like the other stressor. And yeah, one other part of my process for idea generation is usually like low intensity, steady state cardio. So I have a hard time like getting like I'll think of a lot of things in the sauna, but I'm in there for 30 minutes, and then by the time I get out, I'll remember a quarter of them and get
Yep.
pissed off. Maybe they'll come back to me later, and things come to you at least opportune times. But I'll hop on the assault bike and not do high intensity intervals or anything like that, which I love. I hate while I'm doing it, fall off, just like getting
Yeah.
out out in the cold. Same feeling as you lay there on the ground convulsing, but just low steady state on that without anything in my mind when I start, but the phone's nearby and the ideas just start pouring out of me. As I'm on that for an hour, the notes that I come up with during that time or the outlines or ideas, it's wild. And it reminds me very much like Stephen Pressfield, just talking about showing up, just sitting down in whatever your way is and allowing the muse to influence you in some way, shape, or form. Resistance will always be there, but whatever your process is to creatively create content, in whatever way you want to impact the world, it's very cool to hear the different ones that are out there.
Write in the rain, waterproof notebook. Put that in your dry sauna. Like I have a big Write in the Rain. That thing looks like a like committed violence to it, and you can see when it like the first 5 minutes, my brain's just going because the heat got me like my blood's pumping, like I'm hot blooded, and like the writing is neat and in the lines. And then as like minute 7 goes by, it's big blocky letters. And then by minute 12, my brain starts dying. It scribbles, and I can't actually decipher it when I get out of the sauna. And I totally forgot what I was writing. But like that first 5 minutes, use that right in the rain, you'll remember it.
I love that. What a good idea, because I have waterproof notebooks. I have waterproof pens around my
Yep.
house.
Yep.
Too simple, too obvious. I've never thought of doing that. Yeah, but I've got a lot of wisdom from this conversation. That is going to be one of the main ones I take away
Yeah.
from that and apply to my life right now. There's a guy named Chris Lee, former Green Beret medic. He was actually on Gina Kazaz's podcast that we were both on a while ago, several times. So I found him that way. He wrote a really good book called Beyond the Battlefield. Very similar, just his method of writing on what we like to write on human condition and how to improve it. What was I gonna say with Chris? Shit, I completely oh, no. He has this thing on Instagram in the sauna. It's called Angry Thoughts in the Sauna. So he brings actually some recording device in, and he waits. It's a red light sauna, so he's in there for a while, but it's when he starts feeling that internal temperature going up that he starts just talking to the phone with his ideas. But it's a very fun way to generate ideas of where does your mind go, and then he just records it an hour and a half into whatever that he does to the red light.
Yeah.
So it's a very funny way. Brother, we've been talking for hour 15 minutes now. I feel like I have 100 other questions I could ask you, and many things that we could talk about. But for the sake of time, not only everyone listening, but for both of us, we'll have to just do this again sometime.
Yep. I appreciate it. My phone's going to shit the bed. I didn't realize that this method of communication was over the phone, not the computer. So
Yeah.
awesome talking to you, man. I genuinely appreciate it.
Right back at you, man. Take care. Talk soon.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye.